welcome to BBC Points West Tribute to Concorde, the world's only supersonic airliner built here in the West.
Yes, the 26th of November 2003 will live forever in the memory of Concorde fans the world over. The day she finally came home to the city of her birth.
Points West cameras and reporters were, of course, there to record the historic event, and we broadcast live from the hangar at Filton where she was built.
Well, first in this compilation, you'll see the entire programme, exactly as we broadcasted on that night.
Then we've included video not shown by us before of her dramatic fly-past and landing here in the West Country. And in this feast for Concorde fans, we've also included highlights of the rest of our extensive coverage leading up to the final flight.
So sit back and enjoy a moment of history for the West and for the world.
This is BBC One in the West. On this historic day, Susan Osman and Chris Basher with a special edition of Points West.
Concorde has come home. The world's most famous airliner has returned to the city of her birth.
Tonight, a special Points West live from Filton celebrates the events of this remarkable day.
And we join the thousands jostling for the best position to see her final emotional touchdown. Good evening and welcome to Concorde's hangar here at Filton. It was in this huge space that the Concordes originally took shape. And in fact, this aircraft, Concorde 216, rolled out of here 25 years ago, the last one ever to be built.
In fact, our Points West cameras have been out and about in the West collecting the most dramatic pictures of this historic day. And we even have exclusive footage of on board this plane for its last supersonic flight.
And tonight we ask, what next for this great aircraft? Can the West give her the future that she deserves? But first tonight, for Bristol fans, it all began this morning when there was the most fantastic fly-past first over the airfield. Thousands of workers turned out to see the majestic sight of her thundering down the runway.
Yes, within minutes she tracked down the coast and then went across Clifton Suspension Bridge, where Scott Ellis witnessed the thousands of well-wishers who turned out to see her swan song.
Concorde 216, thundering across the West Country. She was the last to leave the Filton factory in 1979, and today she became the last Concorde to leave the sky. Under her final flight path, tens of thousands of well-wishers. These are the scenes up on Clifton Downs this morning, a massive tribute to a great aircraft. Elsewhere, any viewpoint would do. At the suspension bridge, they started queuing at 9 this morning. Some had come as far as Manchester.
I grew up with it, basically. Really, it's always been in my life.
I remember the day it took off. I ran out and seen it for the first time. It was April the 9th.
I came here early. I came here about 9 o'clock and I was the first one here. Yes, complete nutcase, I'm afraid.
The Bellringer family from Taunton did things in relative style. A caravan parked up on the Downs at 3 this morning, then playing a waiting game like so many others.
One of the prestige planes of the world, really, and it's never going to be seen again, so we decided the whole family needs to come and look at it. They're never going to get the opportunity again.
School children weren't going to miss out either. Many had a break from lessons. The skies cleared just in time. 216 was on her way home. But before the final run-in, let's hop on board with these exclusive shots taken for us by the chief steward on today's flight. They flew from Heathrow and then over the Bristol Channel, onwards and supersonic to the south of Ireland before the loop back to the West Country. And here's that first glimpse back on the ground as Concorde sweeps in over Weston.
Concorde turn.
Then a breathtaking moment. Two of Bristol's greatest engineering achievements in one perfect view. Concorde 216 and Brunel's suspension bridge. A roar went up on the Downs. In the city centre, they gazed on. Then her final moments, captured here at Filton High School, just at the end of the runway. The last proud mile of a Concorde fleet that's clocked 140 million miles. An honour the final one should be over Bristol.
Oh, wonderful. Really worth waiting for. There's an old chap in front of me who's 91.
And he was absolutely thrilled to bits. He was real tears in his eyes. It was beautiful. My husband worked on it for 25 years, so really worthwhile.
It's a pity she's gone, but there's nothing we can do about that now.
Farewell then to an old friend, cheered back to her birthplace by thousands of well-wishers. The skies won't be the same without her. Scott Ellis, BBC Points West, Bristol.
The heavens opened over Filton as the crowds waited. Then, amazingly, the grey November clouds parted just in time, as high over the airfield, an old friend appeared at the end of a rainbow. Concorde, beak down for landing, seemed to be grinning at her fans as she came home. A perfect touchdown, a historic moment, because these wheels will never leave the ground again.
Oh, that's the most magnificent sight. Oh, just absolutely glorious sight. Oh, the nation's losing a treasure, I tell you. An absolute treasure. A glorious plane. Wonderful. Wouldn't have missed it for the world. Yeah. Oh, in tears now. Oh.
The plane taxied up and down the runway, swerving off now and then to take a bow, a performer to the very end.
So breathtaking, totally. Oh, can't get over it.
It's had its day, and it's still creating more interest than any other aeroplane ever, after all these years. And I suppose we should be glad that we took part in this experiment.
And then there was the red carpet treatment. Prince Andrew officially met the plane on behalf of the people of Bristol and tried out the controls. Overhead, a Spitfire flew past in salute. Police had asked people to stay away from the roads around Filton. Privately, they'd known all along they were wasting their breath as crowds gathered everywhere.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. It's a really, really memorable day, and there's so many people here. I just think it's brilliant. Really, really, I'm just shaking. Where it's like, I'm just ecstatic.
Good day for us to see, but a bad day to see the end of Concorde, especially without anybody coming along to supersede it.
How a plane that can draw thousands just to look at it can fail to make money is one of life's mysteries for a lot of people, but not to the boss of BA, the man who made Concorde redundant.
She's been a terrific aeroplane, but there are two reasons why we're retiring her. One is that the commercial customers who kept her aloft have stopped flying her, and that's an indication of the times, tough economic times. But also, like all ageing aeroplanes, Concorde's much more expensive to maintain and keep aloft than she was. And the combination of those two things sadly meant that it was time to retire her.
And in the cockpit for that last ever flight, a Filton boy.
Well, it's fantastic. We've been delivering these aircraft all over the world to go into museums, and this is by far the best reception we've had. You know, she was really coming home, and you felt a real empathy with the crowd because we're all enthusiasts who fly it. And so it was obvious that there was a lot of enthusiasts here today. Thousands of people. It was wonderful to see it from the air.
So, farewell. After 30 years thrilling the world, it's mission accomplished.
Well, back in Concorde's hangar at Filton, Concorde 216 is standing here proud, but rather brooding, I fancy, in her temporary home. Later, we'll be asking what next. First, Susan.
Well, I'm joined by two characters who were central to today's historic event. Captain Les Brodie, who was at the controls of the supersonic last flight, and Ted Talbot, who was a design engineer. Ted, you were here at the beginning and at the end.
Yes, I covered most of it. Right at the beginning, I was with the Supersonic Transport Air Committee, and later on, right through to actually coming back to work on the crash.
So what sort of day has it been for you?
I've been talking to my colleagues, and it's a day of sadness. They all wished it would have gone on further. In fact, they're probably a little bit irritated about it, but it's a great day. We've got this aircraft here, and I think it's a glorious thing to have.
Of course, she's standing proudly behind us. Captain Les Brodie, you got to actually land the supersonic flight, but it's actually your last flight ever, isn't it?
That's right. As an airline captain, it's my last flight, and I was very proud and privileged to be here today and do this flight. It was absolutely wonderful, and it's down to people like Ted and his team that we were able to do it, because all the work that was done in the past has come to fruition over the last 27 years.
So like Concorde, you've been grounded as well?
I'm afraid so, but I will fly light aeroplanes. I've got a Tiger Moth I've got to share in, so I'll be flying that in the new year.
No, it's quite by chance that you got to land this flight. Toss of a coin, is that right?
It was, yes. There was 3 managers left on it, Captain Mike Bannister, Captain Paul Douglas and myself. And between us, we had to choose who was going to do the last landing. Well, Mike had done the last commercial flight, so he kindly let Paul and I choose who would do the last landing and the last takeoff. And I won a toss, the Queen decided.
She did indeed. We saw some lovely pictures of Concorde earlier on, and Pudsey Bear waving from the window. It looked like you were having a good time on the last flight.
Well, we have made it a celebration over the last few weeks, a few months in fact, of Concorde's success, and that was a part of it. On board today was like a party. Even though we're sad, just like Ted and his team, that it's got to come out of service, we did try and make it a celebration.
So what's your resounding memory?
Oh, last year, flying over the Palace with the Red Arrows alongside us, I was in the supernumerary seat for that, so I was able to look outside, and I looked down at Westminster Bridge, and all I saw was people, heads, no bridge.
And you could see them today as well, I bet. What about you, Ted?
I think my greatest memory was going over to America and telling them why they couldn't do it.
On that very positive note, thank you both very much, Ted Talbot and Captain Les Brodie. Chris.
Thanks, Susan. It's amazing to try to imagine what it was like originally here in the Concorde hangars, a hive of activity, hordes and hordes of people working on those great planes 35 years ago or so now. It's hardly surprising Concorde means so much to us, and I've been looking back at her story. It was Bristol's equivalent of putting a man on the moon. The technology was decades ahead of its time, and a huge army of designers and engineers worked on it. 250,000 were involved here and in France.
We were the Concorde team. When she flew, such a buzz, you know? Everyone was cheering. And to this day, I mean, you walk anywhere and you see Concorde flying. Everybody, regardless of where you see them, they're all got their heads up in the air looking at that beautiful airplane.
At thousands of pounds a ticket, it was transport for the rich, famous and eccentric. They queued up to fly faster than the Earth turns, faster than a rifle bullet.
It's like the difference between a Ferrari and a Rolls-Royce. If you want a Rolls-Royce, you go on a 747-400. If you want a Ferrari Testarossa, you go on Concorde.
All's going well, she's airborne.
But it had cost £1 billion of taxpayers' money that would never be recouped. Concern about its gas-guzzling, noisy engines meant it never sold. Supersonic flight was banned over land, and only 14 Concordes ever flew regularly. But still the love affair blossomed. People would spend their life savings on getting to Mach 2.
Halfway through the flight, within about 5 minutes, it went from daylight to dark. It was like a time warp. It's marvellous.
Fabulous, wonderful. I mean, it's just something we'll remember for the rest of our lives.
But in July 2000, disaster struck. An Air France Concorde crashed on takeoff. The subsequent downturn in air travel after 9/11 meant confidence was never fully regained. Concorde was costing 3 times more to run than a jumbo. Within 2 years, both airlines had decided to stop flying. BA rival Richard Branson summed up the thoughts of many.
I think it would be sort of industrial sabotage if at the end of October Concorde is never seen in the air again. Last week I flew on a Spitfire, and it was, 55, 60 years after the end of the Second World War. People with love and care and attention have kept them flying. Concorde should have the same sort of history.
But all plans to save it came to naught, and its final commercial flight landed at Heathrow last month. The end of an era, the end of a legend. Well, back on board Concorde 216 today, and a final chance to see what it was like on board. If you are not one of the 2.5 million who've flown on Concorde over the years, then I know a man who can tell us what it was like. He's the fleet's youngest steward, Neil Smith from Bristol. And, well, the first thing you notice, Neil, is that it is very cramped.
certainly is, Chris. Yeah, the first thing that you'll hear when a passenger boards the aircraft is, "Oh, isn't it small?" You know, that literally I'm 6'1", and I'm pretty much touching the ceiling. So yeah, if you're anything above that, then you really do have to be careful when you're coming on. You don't bump your head.
What's it like trying to serve people?
You need long arms. Long arms. It works. No, it's fine for me, but some of the girls struggle. But I know, yeah, lots of leaning across, and but that all adds to the interaction that you're having with the passengers. So.
And what's the atmosphere when you get to Mach 2, for instance?
Oh, well, by then the champagne is, you know, our supplies on board are pretty much running low by the time we're at Mach 2. So the passengers are buzzing, we're up and down. The display screens at the front of the aircraft come to life, and of course everybody wants their souvenir photograph in front of that, you know, Mach 2, 56,000 feet. That's what they go for.
What a shame it's not going to happen again.
Oh, it is, yeah. I was just so privileged and honoured to be in a situation where I can say that I've done it.
OK, let's find out what it was like on the flight deck.
Absolutely fantastic. But of course you couldn't feel any sensation of speed, which was one of the things that the designers got absolutely right. This aircraft can fly on the edge of space where the sky gets darker, where you can see the curvature of the Earth. It can travel at 1,350 miles an hour, twice the speed of sound. It can travel so fast that it's moving faster than the Earth rotates. It's faster than a rifle bullet, a mile every 2¼ seconds. And you don't realise you're moving. And it's amazing because everybody else at these altitudes and speeds are in spacesuits, and our customers are in lounge suits. There you are, going along, the airplane's as steady as a rock, the customers are sipping the finest wines, eating the finest cuisine. They never realise they're moving. The only time you do is if you take off from London in the dark in the autumn or the spring, and you go fast, so far west, and you go so fast going westward that the sun rises in the west. It becomes broad daylight again. You land in New York in daylight, and you see the second sunset of the day. So the aeroplane is fantastic. But what's made this fantastic aeroplane into a legend is the people. The people involved here in Bristol and South Gloucestershire who designed and built the aeroplane, they did that from a dream. It was constructed with vision, and we've operated it with pride. The people in British Airways who've flown the aircraft and maintained it and looked after it, the manufacturers, the authorities, and the team of people that have travelled on board are all one big Concorde family. And it's just the people that make the airplane special. And just to think about that, as we came in here today on the very last supersonic flight, as the airplane heated up because we were travelling so quickly, a gap appears on the flight deck to accommodate the expansion, and we put a hat in there because on the test flight they did that. We put the hat in there, and as the airplane cools, it closes up, and that hat is trapped there forever. And I think it's very appropriate as the hat of the last ever flight engineer to fly with British Airways, a tribute to just one of the people that have made this airplane so special.
Mike Bannister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you're with us during our lunchtime programme, you'd have seen David Garmson surprise Carol Mabillot with an offer of a special on-board tour of Concorde. Well, Carol met her French husband while working here at Filton. Sadly, he's since died. But Carol, I have to say, to see your face at lunchtime, it was such a picture.
I was so shocked. Oh, it was just wonderful.
So how do you feel now, moments from going on board?
Excited, very excited.
Wonderful.
She's beautiful, she's home, and I can't wait to go on.
Super. Well, we won't give you any more tension. We've lined up a VIP tour with Neil Smith, the Concorde fleet's youngest steward. He's waiting on the steps. Go and enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Off you go and have a good time.
Bless you.
Thanks, Carol. Well, of course, the other star of today's event was the Spitfire with a fantastic victory roll. Of those of you two, it was absolutely marvellous, wasn't it? And that's enough to make anyone weep as well. Who'd have thought that a plane decades older than Concorde would be outliving her? And ironically, the engines of the Spitfire were also built here, of course, and the one escorting Concorde today is housed in these very hangars as well. Malcolm Frith has been following her preparation for today.
Rolls-Royce engineers have spent the last few weeks checking every nut and bolt to ensure this supermarine Spitfire was ready for today's historic flight. This one saw action in the Second World War and didn't retire from active service with the Royal Air Force until 1957. Today, this 59-year-old veteran is kept at her base at Filton near Bristol. And as pilot Philip O'Dell prepared for today's flight, he knew it would always be a poignant occasion.
And to be in the Spitfire is always a fabulous experience, and I'm always proud to be sat in a cockpit that flew during the World War II, the end of World War II. put that together with Concorde on Concorde's last ever landing, and I don't think in the whole of my time in aviation to date, and for the rest of my time in aviation, I'll have a better day in terms of history, but also celebration of what has been fabulous about British aviation.
This Mark 9 Spitfire is an unarmed photo reconnaissance version and powered by a Bristol-built Rolls-Royce Griffin engine. During the Second World War, 24,000 Spitfires were made. In 1945, you could buy one from the Air Ministry for £25. Today, if you wanted one, expect to pay around £1 million, and that's if you can find one. However, unlike Concorde, she will continue to thrill the crowds at air shows all over the UK. It seems strange, and yet they've kept these aircraft flying for more than 50 years, and the engineers are confident they can keep these aircraft flying for another 50 years. And yet, for Concorde, well, her life comes to an end because she will never take to the skies again. This is Malcolm Frith for BBC Points West.
What a wonderful aircraft she is. Well, if you're wondering what's happened to the rest of the British Airways Concorde fleet, then don't worry, they've all gone to good homes. Only yesterday, one of the last 7 had an unusual trip by ferry to the Sea Air Space Museum on America's Hudson River. Others are heading to a museum in Seattle, Grantley Adams Airport in Barbados, the Scotland Museum of Flight in Edinburgh. There's one at Manchester Airport, Heathrow Airport, and of course today one made her final visit here to Filton. But what next for this impressive museum piece here? Well, with me is Airbus UK boss Tom Williams and Sheila Cook from South Gloucestershire Council. Good evening to you. When can people come and see the Concorde here then, Tom?
We would expect that after we've done the decommissioning, we'll be ready probably about Easter time to start hosting visits onto the aircraft.
And she's going to be outside, sort of next to the runway?
Yes, we'll be storing her, but until such times as the new museum can be constructed here on the Filton site.
Because the dream is to get her a proper museum here, isn't it?
Yes, and I think she would make a really fitting centrepiece and attract a lot of interest to highlight the tremendous history of aviation in this area.
Absolutely. Well, here is where Sheila Cook steps in, hopefully. South Gloucestershire very much behind this. Can you make sure that a museum gets put here?
We will do our very best. We hope to fulfil that dream. And in fact, I've asked Prince Andrew today if he'd like to come back and open the museum when we're up and running.
Did he say yes?
And he said yes.
Excellent.
So
when's it going to happen?
Well, hopefully within the next 2 to 3 years. And we're working towards it. It's a matter of getting planners, landowners, council and the public to build on the momentum and enthusiasm we've got today, really.
Yeah, quite. Hopefully you can sort out the planners, they're yours.
We'll try.
And the idea is to get something across the other side of the runway near Cribbs Causeway, I think. So.
That would be an ideal location. Obviously, we've got to look at feasibilities and land, etc.
Briefly, how are you going to get the money and what can people do?
In terms of money, we'll be applying for heritage money. To build a museum to include Concorde, it's going to cost something like 10 to 11 million pounds.
Right,
I mean, we may well go out to a public campaign as well.
And can people do anything?
At the moment, they can contact me or through the council and register their interests, and we should be looking to put forward some sort of campaign to raise public awareness and funding.
Great. Sheila, Tom, thank you very much indeed. Well, if Concorde 216 is to become the museum's showcase piece, perhaps we should catch up with one of the first to have a look around the exhibit. Susan's with our surprise guest, Carol Mabbio, inside. Susan.
I certainly am. I am so excited. I'm actually on board Concorde. I can't believe it. What about you, Carol Mabbio? How do you feel?
I just feel so honoured to be sat here, and in fact I just want to say I'm ready for takeoff now, and can we please go to New York? I would just love to. Oh, it's gorgeous, absolutely. Seats are comfy, and I'm so honoured to be here, and I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who made it possible. Wonderful.
Now, you promised your daughter and your son you weren't going to cry.
I'm not going to.
I'm not sure you're going to keep that promise, Carol.
No, I'm not so. I'm not, no. It's wonderful, it's lovely.
It's very cramped though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very, very small. Though I said I'd like to go to New York, I don't know whether I'd like to sit here for 3 hours, 3.5 hours.
Well, I'll let you carry on with your tour, but it's lovely to have you on board. And because you're on board, I'm on board as well, which is great. Thanks very much, Carol Mabbio. I can't believe I've been on Concorde.
It's wonderful, isn't it? What a day it's been. Well, as the great white bird settles into her nest, it's fitting she ends her story where it all began, ending an era for Concorde, for aviation, and of course for Filton.
And it's been a day of extreme emotions, great sadness, great joy, and many memories, of course, that we shared for years to come.
Well, we leave you now with a tribute to Concorde, to the people who made her, and to those who have loved her.
Good night.
turn. Disregard, it was internal. Checker 1-4, returning to Filton. 1-4. Checker 1-2, likewise.
What a difference a day makes. Only yesterday, Concorde was supersonic, and thousands watched in awe as against a dramatic sky it flew in victory over the west. Now it's been dragged into a hangar, no longer a vibrant working machine, but a curiosity. Security officers have been posted, and the plane is strictly off-limits to guard against souvenir hunters. British Airways are stripping the aircraft. Towels, sick bags, headphones and life jackets are being removed. Even the security pad from the cockpit door.
222. Another piece of history going in the bag.
At the back, engineers are taking away the so-called black boxes, the flight recorders which still have the last trip embedded in their memory banks. So Concorde is being stripped of everything that made her a commercial plane, and next week the fuel will be drained, the hydraulic fluid will be removed, and Concorde will become a museum piece. The engines will not be started again, and the famous nose will never bow.
We've got quite a few thousand kilos of fuel to take off the aircraft. We'll be draining the engine gearbox oils, the engine lubrication oils, the fluid from the hydraulic system, effectively taking the lifeblood out of the aircraft.
Perhaps many would prefer to remember Concorde as it was yesterday. Amid the ceremonial of the official welcome, a choir sung The Silver Bird, a piece of music commissioned by the BBC. The singers, our viewers and listeners.
It meant quite a lot to be there. It's something actually happening which is real. In the theatre, you try to make things real. That was real.
Concorde will not be open to the public until next Easter. But the best views will always be of those of her in action.
and children not yet born will look at these pictures and be told of the era when air travel was supersonic. David Garmston, BBC Points West, Filton.
Well, in the run-up to Concorde's last commercial flight in October 2003, Points West paid tribute to the designers and engineers who built her and reflected the West's love affair with the plane by hearing some of your stories. Here are the highlights of those reports.
Hello, Captain Vasher here again. It's hard to believe, but it's Concorde's last ever commercial flight this Friday. If ever there was a time to use that cliche, the end of an era, it's now. So all this week, we'll be celebrating the West Country's great plane through the eyes of local people, people who worked on it, flew in it, and had their lives changed by it. It's not surprising she ranks alongside the world's greatest technological achievements. Just remember some of the facts. It first flew from Filton in Bristol, of course, in 1969. Despite all the high hopes, they built fewer than 24, and only 14 ever flew in regular service, shared between British Airways and Air France. She was designed to carry 130 passengers, flying at not once but twice the speed of sound. That's over 1,300 miles an hour, faster than a bullet. Hard to imagine, isn't it? If your car went that fast, you'd do Bristol to London in just 5 minutes. Among other intriguing facts, despite the freezing temperatures on the edge of space, it goes so fast that the outer skin gets up to 120 degrees Celsius. So hot the entire plane stretches up to 6 inches. She flies at 55,000 feet. That's 11 miles up, higher than any other airliner. It's the closest thing we've ever had to a time machine. Flying supersonic, you turn back the clock, landing in America before you even took off. Well, now, in tonight's Concorde Lives report, some Concorde love stories. Sit back, fasten your seatbelts, and enjoy as we meet some of those whose lives were changed by working on the plane. This week, former workers returned to the same hangars at Filton where they built Concorde. Today's apprentices are now building Airbus planes here.
All ours was hands-on. Everything was hands-on. That's why we had dirty hands.
So much cleaner. Yes.
But it wasn't just a place to work. It was a way of life. And in the social clubs, romance blossomed.
You know, what do you do about girlfriends? I mean, we were lucky. In the evening, we'd all go down to the Aces Club. I mean, every one of us married out one of the girls from the Secretariat College.
The Aces Workers Club was like many other night spots across the West. Sometimes live music, sometimes just from a gramophone player. Among those who fell in love thanks to Concorde, Cliff and Margaret Price.
Monday night in particular, it was heaving on a Monday night, wasn't it? That was the bopping night.
As soon as the music started, you just wanted to get up and dance.
Yeah.
Larry and June Doncaster also met working on Concorde.
There was a lot of romance within the club. Yes. A lot of marriages took place, didn't they? Ours included.
We didn't associate with the girls during the day because they were aloof, they were up in the offices. But when we got down the club, that was something else.
As development work continued in both Filton and Toulouse, the joint project created some bizarre problems.
Alors, où est-ce qu'il travaille en ce moment, Monsieur McDonald? Il travaille dans les ateliers.
French and English classes were set up to help workers to understand each other.
This is a rectangular window square.
No,
Understanding each other was really quite straightforward. We found it was easiest if we each spoke in our own language, and we found we understood the other guy really quite well. In many ways, the culture was different. I suppose the most obvious one is the length of time we used to spend having lunch in France in the early days of the programme.
Some were posted abroad permanently. Points West caught up with one Bristolian housewife getting used to her new way of life.
Toulouse has been our home now for 7 months. While we might all agree that things have been a bit different here, learning French and experiencing things that we wouldn't find in Bristol, we wouldn't have changed it for the world. We're quite happy to be here in Toulouse.
Rotate,
All's going well, she's airborne.
Oh yes, it's a copybook takeoff, isn't it? You know, everything went perfectly.
Oh, it's marvellous to see it go up at last, you know, this is what we've all been waiting for.
Do you feel any personal pride about this?
Oh yes, definitely, no. Oh yes. I can't see why anybody shouldn't do, you know. Now all we're going to wait for is all the others to come rolling out, I suppose, and get cracking.
The main thing was that everybody was part of the same team. And we were the Concorde team. When she flew, such a buzz, you know? Everyone was cheering. And to this day, I mean, you walk anywhere and you see Concorde flying. Everybody, regardless of where you see them, they're all got their heads up in the air looking at that beautiful airplane. I mean, it's part of Bristol's heritage, you know? I mean, we've got Brunel, we've got the SS Great Britain, and we've got Concorde. What better ad for a city, Bristol, than Concorde?
I'm one of the lucky ones. I've had 5 flights on Concorde as a passenger, as a reporter. In fact, they even let me fly it once, the simulator at Filton, that is. I landed at Hong Kong, lovely landing, forgot to put the brakes on, demolished the airport buildings. Everybody who's flown in Concorde rates it a very special moment in their lives. And we've been going through the archives and talking to some of the people who've flown Concorde to compare notes on a magic moment.
How was the flight?
Absolute magic. The acceleration was fabulous. We toasted our retirement at 400 miles an hour.
Okay, full power coming up. Noise set power sign.
What nobody foresaw was that Concorde would become a kind of super skylark doing trips around the Bay of Biscay. And ordinary people like you and me would go aboard for a couple of hours of excitement at supersonic speed. And we came home loaded with souvenirs. We had our certificates to show that we'd done it. I got my ticket and my boarding card for the last flight. Also, a pack of Concorde playing cards. I've got a plate, the saucer, which I was told I could take home from a flight with the Concorde fan club, and salt and pepper as well, which match. And then my favourite, which is this little model Concorde, which you can sort of go with, and then you stick on the shelf at home. I've got it in the loo, actually. But I'm sure people have got these sorts of things littering houses all over the southwest. And we've gathered together some of the ordinary people who went for Concorde flights, and we took them to Yeovilton, where they've got the original Concorde that first flew from Bristol. My heart was pounding with excitement. How did you feel?
It's wonderful. You come out to the airport terminal, you see it, you can smell it, you just want to get on it. It's wonderful.
What about you?
I was terrified.
You can't be.
I was looking forward to you holding my hand when we got on the plane.
Yeah, but it's excited as well, surely.
My worst terrified.
Yeah.
What about you two?
And the takeoff was just out of this world. It was fantastic.
Wendy and Christine, who's from Warminster, were on their way to a twins convention in Twinsburg, America, when they decided to play a joke on the flight crew.
So I went in first and said hello, had a little chat, and said how much I was enjoying the flight. And then I came out again.
And then I went in, I did exactly the same. In fact, I think I chose the exact same words to say, because we'd prepared ourselves.
Yes.
And still they didn't click. They looked a bit sort of strange. And then I came out, then we both went in together, and they were absolutely gobsmacked. They just couldn't cope with it. But fortunately, they were still in control of the aircraft.
The Concorde didn't do a little wobble when...
No, I think they had a mental wobble, but no, the aircraft was all right.
But the cabin crew had a good laugh about it.
Yes.
When Radio Bristol organised a Concorde flight from Filton, Margaret Roberts, who's terrified of flying, had a last-minute panic.
And in the end, you said, Margaret, you'll be so disappointed if you don't go. I'll tell you what, I'll hold your hand. And I said, right, Roger, I will come.
And so on the day?
And so on the day,
we held hands.
Yes.
And you clutched tightly, didn't you? And still got the bruises to show.
I wished afterwards that I hadn't been so frightened and so nervous, because I would have enjoyed it. But I did enjoy it, but I would have enjoyed it much better if I hadn't been so frightened to start with.
But I seem to remember when we landed, we held hands again. Was that my idea or yours?
Yours, I think.
Oh, was it? Jerry Last of Frome was given a Valentine's Day flight by his wife Delly as a reward for giving up smoking.
And to have a Concorde flight was, wonderful. I was shaking. I couldn't wait for February the 14th. Didn't sleep on the 13th. It was wonderful.
And you held hands all the way over, no doubt?
No, you were too busy drinking the champagne.
You had so much champagne. It was, They talk about the curvature of the Earth. I think, actually, the Earth may be flat. It's the champagne that does it.
And what happened at the seats in front of us?
Oh.
You've forgotten that bit.
Twice the speed of sound, tears in the eyes, the couple in front got engaged. Wonderful. Everyone clapped and cheered once they'd drunk the champagne, you know. More.
It was wonderful. It's such a shame that we won't be going on it again.
Nor will anyone, but for the thousands who flew supersonic to America or just around the Bay of Biscay, those brilliant memories will last a lifetime.
The entire Concorde fleet of 16 cost taxpayers over £1 billion to build, but no one bought them. They were eventually sold to British Airways and Air France for £1 each. Yet during its life with BA, it carried 2.5 million passengers and made a profit. So could this proud aircraft have been saved and continued in service for at least another 10 years?
The nation could save Concorde if it really wanted to. The question is, what does the nation want to keep Concorde flying for? Does it want to keep it operating on commercial services? Well, if it did want to do that, then the nation would have to subsidise the people who flew in it. So it would be subsidising the very wealthy people who are now the only people who can afford to fly in Concorde anyway.
In fact, Concorde costs 3 times as much to operate than a Boeing 747 jumbo jet and burns twice as much fuel. And plane makers Airbus, who have kept Concorde flying, have predicted that the maintenance bills on each aircraft will rise by £8 million over the next 2 years. Concorde was becoming too expensive to operate.
As a business, we also have to recognise Concorde was not a commercial success. We have to learn the lessons from that and make sure that we're focusing our development and our investments on products that will deliver economic success as well as technology success.
But step forward Sir Richard Branson. He announced in May this year he wanted to buy British Airways' fleet of Concordes, and he offered £1 a plane, the same amount charged by the British government in 1970. His plan, to operate them on services to New York, Barbados and Dubai. BA politely turned down his offer, but undeterred, Branson had another idea.
Well, what we said to BA is, look, if you're really not going to let your competitor have them, and it's sad that it is actually a competitor that is asking to take those planes from them, if that is stopping you keeping Concorde flying, let's form a charitable trust. I'll put £1 million into it to hit it off. Let's put all 7 Concorde planes at Filton in Bristol, where they were built, so we can actually use those planes to keep Concorde in the air and flying for the next 25, 30 years.
But that now seems unlikely. Instead, Concorde appears to be heading towards its final resting place, the museum, signalling the end of supersonic travel at the beginning of the 21st century. Malcolm Frith, BBC, Points West.
This is BBC One in the West. Now Chris Vasher and Sally Challoner with tonight's Points West.
Hello and welcome to BBC Points West. With you for the next hour here on BBC One for a very special programme.
Yes, we're live at Filton in Bristol, opening the door on the birthplace of Concorde on this historic day.
So come inside for a host of memories as the West's most famous aircraft bows out.
It's been a day of great sadness, but also a day of great celebration.
David's live at Heathrow with the thousands of local people who flocked to see the sad event.
I was there at the first flight of 002 at Filton, and I'm here at the last flight now. So emotional.
Back here at Filton, we hear from people who worked on the plane in this very hangar.
We ask, could there ever be another supersonic airliner built here? So welcome to the place where Concorde was born more than 3 decades ago. It was in this giant hangar that the world's only supersonic passenger plane finally took shape. This is what it looked like in the late 1960s. Filton's army of designers and engineers swarming over the plane as all the many years of work finally came to fruition. But within just a decade, production had stopped.
Well, today a modern jumbo jet is being resprayed here in its place. In fact, this is just one of 3 huge bays here. There's a cargo plane just next door. But as this cavernous hangar somehow seems to echo the feelings of sadness today, let's go live to Heathrow, where Concorde finally stepped off the world stage in some style. David Garmston was there.
Hello, yes, British Airways said this was a day of celebration, but frankly it didn't feel very much like that here. Many said it was a day of mourning and this was something of a funeral. Just take a look behind me, the Concorde fleet now on the ground. Their working days well and truly over. The next step for them is to the museum. Well, let's just take a look at the pictures recorded earlier this afternoon at 4 o'clock when the Concordes arrived at Heathrow for the very last time. There were 3 of them. One came from Edinburgh, the other had been on a short supersonic trip around the Bay of Biscay, and the other, the most glamorous I suppose, had flown in from JFK in New York, arriving in London just 3 hours later, a feat that cannot happen again. Well, of course, there were celebrities on board. Sir David Frost I saw and Joan Collins, but today was really about local people too. Let me just tell you a story about the collaboration between the British and the French. In Bristol, there was a young woman working on Concorde. She met a Frenchman who'd come over for the project. They fell madly in love, they got married, they had children. Now, sadly, he died very young, but the family look to the skies, and when they see Concorde, they think of him. So, of course, they wanted to be here today, and John Maguire joined them as they saw Concorde fly in for the last time. John.
Try and react. Okay, John.
David, the first Concorde has just landed with Carol, Mabby and her 2 daughters now. Carol.
It's amazing. It shouldn't be happening. It's amazing, but it shouldn't be happening. She's got another 6 years left. Give her to Richard Branson. Let Richard have her. Oh, fantastic.
You're clearly very emotional. What sort of feelings or what sort of memories does it bring back to see Concorde this afternoon?
I met my husband through Concorde, my children through Concorde. She's totally amazing. I was there at the first flight of 002 at Filton, and I'm here at the last flight now. I'm so emotional. I'm sorry.
No,
I just, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And there's the other one coming now.
Absolutely, the second one just coming in behind now, and of course it would have been fantastic for your husband to have been here today.
Unfortunately, he died in 1981, but that's life. Oh, here's the other one.
There's the next one coming in. Just a quick word with Shelley. You actually flew on Concorde earlier this year.
I did. I flew on Concorde in April with my brother, he is here, but he doesn't want to be filmed, and it is just absolutely amazing. You just can't describe it. It's completely different to any other plane, and I'm just really lucky, really privileged to have flown on it. And yeah, again, very, very, very sad. You know, my dad's memory really lived on through Concorde, and you know, now Concorde's going. It's going to be tough. But we've got lots of pictures and videos.
But it shouldn't be.
No.
It shouldn't be.
Give it to Richard.
There's another 6 years left in that plane. They've killed her off too soon.
All right. Well, thanks very much for spending this time with us. Thank you very much indeed. David, there you go. It's not just about a plane, is it? It's obviously very much about people, certainly people from Bristol. Back to you.
Actually, that's exactly what Tony Benn said when he got off one of the planes a short time ago. He paid tribute to the Bristol workers, and particularly, of course, in Tony Benn fashion, to the shop stewards. Back to you in Filton.
Now, Concorde is, of course, unique, the only supersonic passenger plane to have entered service, and many say the last. But what of her legacy? And is it really the end of the age of supersonic travel? Here's our correspondent, Malcolm Frith.
It's hard to believe that research into commercial supersonic flights first began in Britain in 1956. The race was on. The Russians built a supersonic passenger jet, but it crashed. The Americans tried to build one, but got no further than an expensive wooden mock-up. But it was Concorde that won the race, yet today marks the beginning of its retirement. The question now is what comes next. Britain's aerospace boffins haven't been idle. Here at Filton, a small group are still researching into the son of Concorde, a 225-seater AST. Much of their work is still top secret.
We've not ruled out in the long term the possibility of supersonic travel. So we will have a small number of engineers continuing to look at the feasibility of this type of program, and trying to understand what the key enabling technologies would be to make it happen. But we won't see it for the next 20 years.
But while supersonic travel may now be just a flight of fancy, the reality is that the airlines are no longer interested in transporting passengers through the sound barrier. For them, the future is big, and that comes in the form of the Airbus A380. This is the next generation of jumbo jets. It can carry up to 800 passengers and fly halfway around the world non-stop. But have we finally seen the end of supersonic flight?
I think right now it doesn't look that easy to see a 150-seater or a 200-seater supersonic passenger transport aircraft. It could be the case, though, that a smaller business-type aircraft, which is supersonic, could come along.
Well, the Americans have just announced they're hoping to open a new chapter. They're aiming to produce a supersonic aircraft with a sonic boom 100 times less than Concorde's, and it should be allowed to land anywhere in the world, something Concorde never achieved. Malcolm Frith, BBC, Points West.
Back in the Concorde hangar, let's remember now how 30 years of supersonic flight have spanned 3 generations in many families.
Yes, for our final instalment of Concorde Lives, Maurice Flynn has visited a local school where links to Concorde are stronger than anywhere else.
No one had ever seen a plane like that before. It was like a bird.
The fastest passenger plane.
It's just the most beautiful airplane ever built, and probably will be.
Generations of Concorde workers and their children went to school right beside the runway at Filton Hill Primary. Today they're well aware of the local heritage, though few have ever seen her. Face to face with Concorde's designers and engineers is a chance to learn more.
Great shame they haven't seen it, you know. Yeah, and the questions they've asked have been good questions. But some of them I've had a lot of work at to get the answers to.
Few may have seen her, but they learned quick in Filton.
The first one was built in 1966, and the last one was built in 1979. It carries 120 people, including the 3 pilots.
It goes, I think, 1,350 miles an hour.
When Lynn and Juliet were youngsters at Filton Hill, the whole school would close whenever Concorde was being tested.
It was so loud and we were standing out here looking over at the runway, and our chests would vibrate.
The whole foundation's just to shake, and the smell of the aviation fuel and the smoke at the back was incredible, but the noise was mad. You couldn't hear yourself think.
For 3 generations, Concorde's been a flying wonder. Even now, her final journey is inspiring.
I'm doing a menu for Concorde's last menu. Starters is supersonic soup or fruit. Main course is sizzling sausages.
Ooh, lovely. Sounds great. Now, would you like to be on the last flight?
Yeah, but I can't afford it, unfortunately.
One of the retired British Airways Concordes has arrived in New York by boat. The supersonic aircraft was towed along the Hudson River from JFK Airport on a barge. It'll become the latest addition to the intrepid Sea Air Space Museum. Concorde will be welcomed to the tourist attraction in a special ceremony this afternoon.
We've been keeping you across the progress of Concorde on that amazing barge.